everyone.
Hi,
My name is Nokolo,
and I'm Bonolo.
and welcome back to Did You See That? Where we take our favorite reviews out of the group chat and into the world of social media to share with you. And the Pope is dead. Like, this is an announcement.
This is an announcement. This is the show that we are reviewing today.
Okay.
A
On
brilliant
a serious,
film.
yes.
On a serious note.
Serious note.
The Pope is not dead. Everybody calm down. However, in this movie that we're about to review, picture this. The scene starts, the Pope is dead.
The Pope is dead.
You have a bunch of cardinals that are standing around him, and everybody is worried that the Pope has died, and now we have to elect a new Pope.
And welcome to the movie that we are reviewing, Conclave. So, it is set in Rome, and as we have mentioned, the Pope has just died, and so all the cardinals from around the world, vast parts of the world, gather in Rome because they now need to elect a new Pope. And they gather in what is called the Conclave, and they need to elect a new Pope, and they are sequestered away from the outside world, away from what is meant to be seen as influences that may affect the decisions that would happen internally. And the person that is responsible for heading this is Rolf Fiennes, who is an actor, and he acts as Cardinal Lawrence. And so he is responsible for overseeing the election, and he primarily returns. However, in his return, prior to him returning, he was actually planning to resign as dean, and he is a man that is battling with his faith and has doubts, and so was struggling with that, and so his intent was to leave. However, the Pope that has just died had denied his resignation. And so it now follows the story where we now see all of the cardinals under one roof, and it explores so many important themes of the interplay between politics, religion, and how that is impacted and affected and influenced by race, class, and gender.
Which is so funny, right? Because these are usually themes that you would think are secluded from those kinds of people, like people who are in religious spaces, who are leaders, who are
agreed. And also I think it's because we always see people that are cardinals and the Pope as almost like the closest people to God. And so the imagery that you would have of that is almost like saints, right? They don't drink, child.
They don't drink. They don't be out here smoking.
They're not involved in the world. They're celibate.
They deny their flesh.
Amen.
They are in the spirit.
And so they amen. And so they are not influenced by, these worldly things because we are just mere mortals, but they are close to God. You know what I mean? And so the interesting thing, though, is that in this movie, it explores during this election scandal, politicking of its highest order, of greed, of who wants to be chosen to be, a cardinal, of the Pope, and then also how there's elements of race, should we be having a first Black Pope?
How scandalous is that going to be for the Catholic Church and what it stands for? And so I think what was mostly interesting about this film is, as you were saying, there are a bunch of cardinals that come together. All of them have different political views. And so in the election and stuff, all of them are basically grappling with who do we want to be the face of the Catholic Church and what does that mean to the rest of the world?
And also the face of the Catholic Church, what causes and what rights do they follow? Do they not follow? So there's kind of like 4 important cardinals, right? In the show. So we have Cardinal Tedesco. He is a conservative that wants to take us to the Dark Ages.
He wants to go back. in time.
Doesn't believe in women's rights, doesn't believe in gender rights,
doesn't believe in immigration,
doesn't believe in respect for other religions and faith. And this is also happening at a time in which there's a war happening in Italy. And so all of that, and he tries to blame it on, it being a war between Christianity and Islam. And so he's in the running, right? And then the second person is Cardinal Bellini. Who I think is the most sensible.
I agree.
He's also ambitious.
Yeah.
But I think his ambition is in the right place.
That's because we are liberal people. Because the things that he stands for, which was quite interesting, especially with the backdrop of the Catholic faith, is that he is about wanting to open the institution up to women in ways that they're not just sisters and nuns. He is about, same-sex marriages. He is about, equality, gender, be it race, etc.
And those are his causes.
Yeah.
But he is also equally ambitious, but in a way in which he sees the game. He sees this election for what it is, which is politics at play.
Yeah.
And that it is important for the right pope to be elected, because this will ultimately be the face of the church going forward, right? And then we have Cardinal Lawrence, who I would say is more of like a friend to Cardinal Bellini. And he's more of on the fence. So he tries to straddle between Cardinal Tedesco, far right, and Cardinal Bellini, who he sees as ambitious, but Cardinal Bellini sees him as naive to what this is about.
To the fact that this is actually a political election.
This is a political election, but he wants to play it off as this is for God and by God.
And may God's will be done.
And may God's will be done.
Yeah.
But I think Bellini is the more practical person, because he sees that we're dealing with people and we're dealing with humans.
Exactly.
Right?
Who are driven by ambition, greed, and all of these things.
And then we have Cardinal Adeyemi.
So, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, when we first started and when he was first introduced, I was like, oh, okay, cool. This would be cool, like flipping the script. Because in the beginning, we see, like, in terms of the votes, Cardinal Adeyemi is getting a lot of votes. And it's looking like he's going to be, the first Black Pope that's elected. This is where we see that it's a game of politics, where Cardinal Tremblay, who is in the fourth sort of running-ish, he makes it such that, so his game is to basically dig into all of the cardinals' pasts and try use this as a weapon to demonstrate that they're unfit to be the new pope. And what happens is that initially he is fired. So before the pope dies, he fires him from, having to run to be a new pope. But of course, the pope is dead, and so nobody really knows if this is a true thing that happened or whatever. And so what he does is he somehow manages to get a sister or a nun from Cardinal Adeyemi's past.
In Nigeria.
What
a tsotse.
Such a tsotse. And we learned that Cardinal Adeyemi was 30 at the time. He had a relationship with this nun who was 19 at the time.
And you're not supposed to be having sexual relations as a cardinal.
Number one. Number two, we find out that Mans has a whole child.
A whole ngane.
And then he says, this kid doesn't know who the father is. So, like, I can still be in the running to be Pope. I said.
So he tries to reason with Cardinal Lawrence, who's responsible for overseeing this election. And he's just like, the child doesn't know who I am. Let me run. It was just a transgression. It was a lapse.
It was a lapse. Yes.
And so he's trying to reason with Cardinal Lawrence to allow him to run. But Cardinal Lawrence said, not on my watch.
No.
Not on my watch. So that's how he kind of gets disqualified.
Yeah.
And then Cardinal Tremblay, as Bonolo said, he was the last person to see the Pope before he died. He was about to be fired. He's the most probably scandalous of them all, because then there are documents that are discovered by Cardinal Lawrence, who, as we've said, is meant to oversee this election. He breaks the seal into the Pope's office where the Pope died, and he finds multiple documents of not just Cardinal Tremblay bringing this nun to Rome to smear Cardinal Adeyemi's name. Then there are bank statements and transfers that show that he was trying to pay for votes
to be elected as Pope.
I said, you scandalous cardinals.
I said, not corruption in the Catholic Church.
Not corruption in the church of its highest form. Of its highest form being displayed here.
Yeah.
During this election. But I think what was so interesting is that as like I was watching this, as you said, we've always seen people like that as being closest to God and that they don't have vices, right? And it was so interesting to see one, you know, in the halls outside, the cardinals are smoking.
Their cigarette stubs. What are they called? Buds.
Cigarette buds. Yeah. And during dinner time, the cardinals are having wine. I said, ain't you supposed to only be having that wine at Holy Communion? I said...
Yo, this movie was brilliant because you start to see that, like, actually, these people are like me. These people are like me. They have their vices.
So like, brilliant. Yeah. It just shows you that, like, these people that we've put on a pedestal, that politics just comes into play everywhere. And even in an election, it is not about
let the best person do the job.
Not even let the best person, may God's will be done. You know, there is no God's will being done. We are seeing heavily politicking at play. And people canvassing for votes and people buying votes and people doing scandals. You know, there are so many scandals, you know. And Cardinal Lawrence is trying to get
and to steer the ship.
But there's a plot twist.
There is such a plot twist. So if you haven't watched it, go watch the movie, then come back to this review so we can discuss, honey.
So there's one cardinal that we have not mentioned. And this is the plot twist. So at the beginning, when all the cardinals arrived in Rome, they had counted the numbers and everyone was present. Until a spanner in the works shows up. There is a cardinal that was appointed by the late Pope. We said, okay. And it turns out this is Cardinal is it Benitius?
Something like that, yes.
And this cardinal is from Kabul.
Yeah.
That's in Afghanistan, right?
That is in Afghanistan, and this cardinal has also served in the Congo. So initially we're like, oh, okay, hectic. This cardinal like has been in quite tricky territories. He served in all of these places, but he wasn't initially on the list. Long story short, they figure out, okay, cool, he is actually supposed to be here.
And the popes are also quite shocked to see him because they were like, there are Christians in that territory.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's what makes them a little bit more welcoming towards him initially, but like mixed reviews because they're like, wow, you have allowed yourself to still be Christian even in a predominantly like Muslim country.
And also have worked in contentious areas.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so during the voting, he actually wants Cardinal Lawrence, who is steering and foreseeing this election, to be the Pope. But obviously, Cardinal Lawrence is struggling with his faith. And so he tries to persuade him to give his votes to Cardinal Bellini. Because, child, we cannot have Tedesco because Tedesco is far right, and we cannot have Adeyemi, child, who got a child in Nigeria, like who got a kid, you know. So he sees the most logical option as Cardinal Lawrence, but he does not want Cardinal. But Cardinal Lawrence does not want the position of Pope, and so he makes a speech, which is kind of that, really now puts him in the running. And he makes a speech about the importance of centering God, centering the truth,
and the church
in this decision.
And let's put our egos aside.
And putting our egos aside. And he comes out victorious.
Yeah, and he's actually selected the Pope. Now, here's the plot twist. In all of this, because everybody is doing background research on all of these different popes,
Cardinal Lawrence be doing
a lot of background research, because of course he wants the best candidate to win, right? And so we find out that Cardinal Benitez has been going to Switzerland, Geneva, for medical treatment, but we don't know what the treatment is about, right? And so we find out that he was supposed to go to a clinic. Turns out he didn't go to this clinic. And so now, after he's been elected Pope, he has a conversation with Cardinal Lawrence. And in this conversation,
it is revealed that Cardinal Benitez was in Switzerland because he was going to do a laparoscopic hysterectomy.
So now, for those of you who don't know what a hysterectomy is, it's when you remove your organs, your reproductive organs. And so what we find out basically in this thing is that Cardinal Benitez was born intersex. And so the reason that he was going to go to Geneva is to basically get a hysterectomy to remove his female reproductive organs. Which begs the question, right? Because the Catholic Church is predominantly male in terms of who leads it. It's always a man that's in charge and stuff. However, because now the elected Pope is intersex and has both organs, it begs the question in terms of, okay, what does being intersex, but also in that leadership position where it is predominantly a male role, what does that look like? It puts a question on that in terms of like leadership and stuff like that. In terms of gender, it also begs the question of what does sin look like then, right? Because we've never seen a female pope, for example, but in a situation where this pope was born in this way, you aren't necessarily born into sin, right? Because this is how this person was created. And so when this person is now elected to like lead the church, knowing very well that genetically they've got male and female organs, it puts it in a little bit of murky waters.
And also, well, the interesting thing is that he says to Cardinal Lawrence, who discovers these things, Cardinal Lawrence just be discovering
knowing people's secrets.
But that's the manager of the conclave, so he needs to know everything, right? So he obviously tells Cardinal Benitez that, like, I know you've been going to Switzerland, and the plot twist or the interesting thing here is that he tells him in return that the late Pope knew about this. And
because he wanted to resign initially, and the late Pope declined his resignation.
The late Pope declined the resignation.
Which says a lot about who the late Pope was.
And he knew about this, and also Cardinal Benitez didn't end up going ahead with the laparoscopy to remove his female reproductive organs, because for him, he says that he is made in the image of God. And he felt that it would be wrong for him to undo something that God has created and how God has created him.
So powerful.
Which is such a powerful statement.
So powerful, because also it brings into question, like, because of course you have church that has all of these rules and things, right? But sometimes a lot of the times, or a lot of the reasons why when we have conversations people don't go to church and stuff is they'll say, like, that's where I've felt the most judged, that's where I've felt the most excluded and isolated and stuff. And so what was interesting about this film is you have this man who is literally the embodiment of what Christ stood for.
Amen.
And I don't even be going to church like that, but like, he's an embodiment of what Christ actually stands for, outside of like the rules and the this and the this and the this. And I thought it was just so powerful how Cardinal Lawrence was like, you know what, actually, yeah, that is the person who should be Pope. And what's also interesting is he says, Cardinal Benitez says that, he thinks that he is the best fitted person for this because he's oscillated in between certainty and uncertainty. And it also goes back in terms of, how he was born and all of those things.
But it's so interesting because like his character, he's oscillated between certainty and uncertainty, right? Because he is intersex. But it speaks to just beyond that. Also that like he is from Kabul, Afghanistan, but he is a cardinal for the church.
Yeah.
It's some sort of like a double consciousness of like
Yes.
walking these two, like his identity is very much around grappling with contrasting identities and realities and walking in between those, like being within and without.
And that is what a pope should be, right? Because a pope ideally should be somebody who is able to sort of see things from a bird's eye view, but also understand different identities, be able to be welcoming of different identities, different religions, different contexts, etc.
Well, that's your view.
Well,
because as we've seen, them cardinals have other views of what the pope should be.
That's true.
But yeah, that is. But it was interesting how it ended because we don't see him kind of being ordained and seeing the ceremony. We just see Cardinal Lawrence being outside and he's playing with the turtles. And then we hear clapping outside of Rome. So we assume that he has now been introduced to the rest.
Oh, no, he has. Well, not introduced, but the lighting of the chimney signifies to everybody in Rome that we've now, or the world actually, that we've now elected our pope.
Yes, but what I'm saying is people were so in some of the theories online, they were like,
not you reading theories.
I know. I was reading articles that like have been written as reviews.
Yeah.
People were like, so who is the pope?
Really?
Because we don't know what Cardinal Lawrence ended up doing.
Oh, I thought Cardinal Lawrence takes that and lights the thing and is like, this is our pope. Is the sense that I got. Let us know what you got after that. But essentially, that is the story. In terms of how you would rate this movie, what would you rate it? What would you rate it and would you recommend it?
Beautiful cinematography. The cinematography. Ooh, beautiful.
It actually reminds me of The Handmaid's Tale.
Yes,
cinematography.
Yes, but also like it reminds me of The Handmaid's Tale because of like where they've chosen to film it, but also just the movement of the characters in unison. You see that scene where they were holding umbrellas outside and they were walking. It feels like it's so stunning. It feels like they are moving in sync. So the cinematography was stunning. It plays a huge role on this idea of the church, this idea of purity, this idea of enlightenment and being close to God.
But then also oscillating between being actually human
and being human, and
what does it mean
and what does it mean to have those vices?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the politics that are at play tied with religion and I think it's interesting because people sometimes tend to view religion and politics divorced from each other, but here it was integrated in such a way where you were seeing these very church people that are meant to be by and for God, who probably are in their own worldviews, but who are heavily politicizing this election, and not for may the best man win,
the good of the
church and the greater good of the world. And then how elements of class and gender and sex and race all play into that. So it was a stunning movie. It's won awards as well.
Deserved every single one.
Ralph Fiennes was a stunning actor as Cardinal Lawrence. I don't actually have qualms. I'd give it a 10.
Yeah?
I'd give it a 10.
Yeah, I'd give it a 10 as well for all of the reasons that you've mentioned. And also, as I've said in our previous Squid Games episode, go watch. I love a thinker. I love things that are contradictory in nature and just like two opposing ideas having to exist at the same time. And I think this is one of those movies that allowed for that to happen. And also allowed for you to have questions and like to think about like whether it's okay to question faith and whether you can have faith in questioning and and all of these things, right? And like I just thought, I thought it was amazing. And I think why it resonated with me as well was I grew up Catholic, right? And so constantly in Sunday school I would have a lot of tension and being like, but some of the things that the Sunday school teachers saying don't make sense. But like when you question, you're problematic and all of these things. And what I loved about this movie is that it invites you to question. And it does it in such a beautiful way that it doesn't bash religion. It doesn't say that this is the way you should do it and this is the way you shouldn't do it.
And that it's important to doubt.
And that it's important to doubt. And
it's okay to doubt.
It's okay to doubt, and you grow in faith in doubting, which is what I really loved as well. So yeah, I think I'd also definitely give it a 10 out of 10. And also those costumes, I wanted to get a little Father garment. You know what I'm saying?
You wanted to be Cardinal B.
I said I want to be Cardinal B. You know what I mean? Friend, those outfits.
Yeah, they were.
I was just like, this is fashion for days.
Stunning. That's why it reminds you of The Handmaid's Tale. That red.
Yeah, stunning. So yeah, definitely also give it a 10 out of 10. Would I recommend it? If that's not clear, I would definitely recommend it.
This is something you can watch on Sunday if you don't know what to watch.
When you come back from church, watch it because it's just, it's stunning. It is 2 hours long, so give yourself time, but like it's a 2 hours well spent. It starts off as a little bit of a slow burn, but
so you need to be focused.
But it's really good. So yeah.
Awesome.
That brings us to the end of our review. Thank you guys for joining. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Awesome. And see you guys next week.